On the 6th of July in the year 1785, the Congress of the United States of America made a significant announcement proclaiming the dollar as the national currency. This was a monumental political decision that followed the young nation's acquisition of independence from Great Britain. The leaders of the nascent state were eager to distance themselves from the British pound as well. However, the first dollar coin was minted only 9 years after this historic congressional session. Similarly, at the end of World War II, American currency was tied to gold. The reasons why there was a prohibition on the issuance of banknotes in the USA for decades is a curious question. These were not mere pieces of paper. They were composed of 75% cotton and 25% linen, plus synthetic fibers of red and blue hues. This is how dollars are made. The combination of these materials in such proportions endows the banknotes with durability and elasticity. To tear a bill, one would have to fold it approximately 4,000 times. The dollar became the national currency of the United States in the year 1785. The proposal was introduced to Congress by the third president, Thomas Jefferson. However, the term dollar was not an American invention. A large part of what was found in the New World was brought from the Old World, and the same fate befell the dollar, or more precisely, the silver thaler, which was known even during the times of the Roman Empire. It evolved differently in various countries, but the key element that remained was the word dollar. If we take its pronunciation in different languages, or more precisely, its original pronunciation, thaler, then we get the very dollar. In Spain, it was called daro. In the southern Netherlands, dalder. In the Scandinavian countries, dollar. And in England, dollar. But these countries also had their own national currencies. The British, Spaniards, Portuguese, etc. brought them to America. In addition to the dollar, Spanish silver reales were also popular among settlers. Each was worth 1/8 of a British pound and was therefore called piece of 8. Over time, this term transformed into dollar. An interesting aspect of currency at that time, whether it was the thaler or the piece of 8, was how its value could be measured quite simply. Coins were weighed. However, gradually, all coins in the North American colonies came to be called dollars. Also, by the end of the 15th century, the famous symbol of the dollar, the letter S with 1 or 2 vertical lines, appeared. Historians cannot say for certain why this particular symbol was chosen. There are several theories. One suggests that it is an abbreviation of the word peso, as in the way Americans wrote the P and S superimposed over each other, eventually leaving just the S. Another theory tells of the overlaying of the letters U and S, which derived from the English phrase United States. A third option relates to the Pillars of Hercules, because if we look at the flag of Spain, we can see that there are 2 pillars around which a sort of parchment is wrapped, and this is the third theory regarding the origin of the dollar sign. The first silver dollars appeared under Thomas Jefferson, but paper dollars did not emerge until almost 80 years later. During this time, the United States went through several unsuccessful financial experiments related to the introduction of banknotes. Initially, during the War of Independence, the authorities circulated the continental dollar, which were essentially not money but bonds. The government issued them, leading to such a situation where they were printed in such large quantities, and not by the state but by counterfeiters to finance the war for independence. The financial outcome of the war for independence was so dire that American authorities banned the printing of paper money and even enshrined this provision in the Constitution of the year 1787. However, they overlooked a small nuance. There was a loophole in the text of the law. State financial organizations could not issue paper money, but private ones could. As a result, the USA was literally flooded with so-called wildcat banks. They uncontrolledly showered the country with their banknotes, much like wildcats in the woods of the continent. They were issued by the states, meaning they were state bonds that eventually had no circulation. Although this was a very unsuccessful attempt, there was still paper that was issued either by the Treasury or the Ministry of Finance. Here, however, these were purely private bank issues, meaning that state banks could not issue their currency or any paper money at all. Nevertheless, there were many paper dollars of different designs in the USA. Special albums with samples of banknotes even came out so that the unfortunate Americans could somehow recognize them. The era of wild banking ended in the year 1861, when the Civil War began in America between the northern and southern states. Each of the opposing sides printed its own dollars, but in the end, the Southerners lost, and the money of the Northerners became the main currency throughout the territory of the USA. On the banknotes, at the suggestion of the Reverend Watkinson, the inscription "In God We Trust" appeared. These words seemed to imply that the higher powers were on the side of the victors. Until the 60s, all banknotes were black and white, and considering that the art of photography was developing, let's say, they were very easy to counterfeit. As a result, the ministries of finance of the North and the South turned to the company American Bank Note, which patented the green ink produced in Canada. It was very difficult to counterfeit at that time. The use of green color gave the dollars a second name, bucks, because one side of the bill was black and white and the other green. Americans called it GNB, which translates to greenback. Over time, all of this transformed into the word buck. There is also a hint of conspiracy in the history of the U.S. currency. Proponents of conspiracy theories are convinced that the all-seeing eye in the pyramid on the $1 bill appeared under the influence of the Freemasons. By the beginning of the 20th century, the U.S. budget was in a very sad state, but across the ocean in Europe, World War I had begun. For Americans, the global conflict opened up new opportunities for the redistribution of colonies, the struggle for the redistribution of trade routes. What did the Americans do? They lent money, thereby gaining additional profit from the fact that they constantly issued money for the purpose of lending it out, with the dollar backed by silver and gold. And many states took this money on loan. Meanwhile, more than half of the United States money went to the purchase of weapons and military equipment from them. At the end of the two world wars, it became clear that the dominance of the British pound was a thing of the past. Britain lost its status as a financial superpower, and primacy remained with America. In the year 1944, a landmark conference took place in the American town of Bretton Woods. 44 countries participated, including the Soviet Union. They decided that the US dollar, backed by gold reserves, would become the main reserve currency. To put it simply, what the Bretton Woods system was, it was an agreement among a number of leading world economies at that time that the dollar would become the main reserve currency because a huge amount of loans for allies fighting fascist Germany were actually issued in dollars. The dollar becomes the main world reserve currency, and its value is equated to $35 per troy ounce. A troy ounce is 31.1 grams of gold. However, the Bretton Woods system failed after 20 years. In the 60s, the United States needed money for the war in Vietnam and turned on the printing press. A huge amount of unbacked dollars appeared, and the deficit of the American budget grew. European powers demanded that Washington exchange the purchased dollars for gold. In the end, only France and Germany took more than 3,000 tons of precious metal out of the USA. On the 15th of August, in the year 1971, the USA officially stopped paying gold for dollars, and the provision that there was a tie to gold was simply canceled. And thus began the history of floating currency exchange rates, not only in the USA, but also in the world. The exchange rates of currencies in all countries became floating, but the tie to the dollar remained. However, considering the cyclical nature of history, everything may soon change.